It's been said that every quilt tells a story, and it's so true. But I also believe every quilter has a story to tell. I wanted to hear about the people behind these wonderful quilts and thought you'd enjoy hearing about their lives also. Welcome to A Quilter's Life. Jan Lockhart hasn't been quilting all that long, but she has fallen in love with our craft. I am awestruck by the stunning feathers quilt she made using a pattern from Alison Glass. Jan sent a picture of this quilt to be used as the feature picture for this episode. You may also find it on her episode page on A Quilter's Life website. Jan, I am so thankful that you agreed to be on A Quilter's Life. I'm looking forward to hearing your story.
I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I have the best sisters in the world. Both of my sisters, Lois and Ruth, have shared their friends that quilt and contacted me. So I am so thankful that Ruth contacted you and we are able to do this. How did you get to know my sister Ruth?
You know, that was such a long time ago. And I love Facebook for the very reason that you can catch up with people that you've known for years. So I went to Cedarville College in Ohio, which is now Cedarville University. And the very first Sunday that my parents dropped me off, we had a dorm meeting. And so I go into this dorm meeting and I don't know a soul. And this darling little girl named Ruth, and she was tiny and petite and smiling and put together, introduced herself to all of us. And she said she was going to be our RA. She was going to be in charge of us in the dorm. And I just fell in love with her. She was so sweet. And so then I lost touch all those years. And then one day, one of my other friends from Cedarville posted something and I see that Ruth has responded. And I'm like, oh, my word, that is Ruth. So yes, I love your sister too. She was a great influence for me and a great help for me. So loved her, still love her.
Oh, that's great to hear. I don't always get to hear stories about my older sisters.
Oh, is she the older one?
She's the middle.
Okay.
Well, Jan, let's jump back to where you were born and raised.
I'm from a little bitty farm town in Illinois. It's called Cissna Park. It's about 100 miles south of Chicago and about 45 minutes from Indiana. Small farming community. Lived there my whole life. My grandparents on my dad's side lived there. My dad's from a huge family. He has 14 brothers and sisters. The majority of them lived there. My mom is from a town about 2 hours away. Her family all lived there. So great, great upbringing in that little bitty farming community.
I'm so jealous that you had family close by.
Lots of family close by. It was awesome. We spent so much time together. It's really a wonderful, wonderful upbringing.
Mm-hmm. And how about a special childhood memory during those years?
You know, I tried to think of just one. I can't think of just one. I can think of all of them with my cousins. My grandpa owned a little piece of land that we called the timber, and it really just had a little bitty lake. The whole piece of land was probably only 7 acres, and it had a little bitty pond in it. And we would gather there, aunts, uncles, cousins, at least once a month on Sundays. Sometimes we would do it during the week, and we would swim and we would play baseball and picnics and potlucks and cookouts and chicken fries and just, And then we would always have Christmas Eve at my grandfather's house, which actually my sister now owns. She purchased it a few years ago, so it's still in the family. And those Christmas Eves were so special because almost everybody was there. So we would have, 14 brothers and sisters and spouses and children. And, there's 100 people there. We would all stand up on the beautiful wooden staircase and we would sing Christmas carols. And then we would open Christmas presents and just have a fabulous time. So those are really my great memories, is really focused around family.
I'm assuming you got some pictures of you all standing on that staircase.
Yes, I did. There's a company that's called Storyworth where they send you a question once a week and you can write your own story. And so I'm doing that. So it's so much fun when I go back home to my mom's house, looking through old pictures, trying to find pictures of all of those times. Yes, we have quite a few pictures of us on the staircase. It's great.
Over the years, what employment have you had?
I graduated from college with a communications major, and I worked for a radio station. As soon as I graduated, I wrote the commercial copy for commercials. Then I moved to Dallas from up in Illinois, which is another whole long story in and of itself, and worked for a department store writing their commercial copy, and then worked for advertising agencies. So I did that for many years until our first daughter was born, got married down here in Texas and had our first daughter. And then I did not work for a while. I just raised my kids and just did part-time things at home, had a sewing business out of my home, worked for a little tea room 1 or 2 days a week. And then when we moved to San Antonio, which is where we are now, and my kids were all in school, I went back to school and I worked for the school district just as a secretary for a principal. And I worked in the child nutrition department in central office. So I've done a lot of things, quite a few jobs I've had over the years, different jobs.
Do you have a job right now?
I am retired. I retired about 7 years ago.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks. I always told my husband I wanted to retire when my first grandchild was born. But we got to the place where about actually a year before our first grandchild was born, we didn't even know we were going to be grandparents then. We just decided that that was a good time for me to retire. So I was retired by the time my first grandson came along. It's been fabulous. So now I'm a full-time Nana.
Does that mean that they live close enough for you to see them often?
My son and his wife live here, and they have 2 grandkids. And then my daughter lives in Houston. So she's about 3.5 hours away. So they live close enough. 2 of them are, 20 minutes away, and the others are close enough where I can get to them if I need to in a hurry.
Nice.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Jan, is there anything else about your family that you wanted to share?
Well, like I said, I have 3 kids. My daughter is the oldest. She's the one who lives in Houston, and she's married and has 2 kids. My middle son is married, and he lives in Colorado Springs. They don't have any kids yet. And then my youngest got out of the military about a year ago, and he is now in San Antonio with his wife and 2 grandkids. So got 3 kids, wonderful husband, a dog. Life is good.
Is there a story behind how you met your husband?
Oh, yeah, that's a story. Like I said, I had moved down to Dallas on my own. After college, about a year, I'd worked for about a year at home, and then I moved down here, just kind of wanted a change of pace. And that was the time when jazzercise was really popular, dating myself there. That was in the 80s. And I was going to a jazzercise class and made a couple of really good friends. And one of them one day said to me, my brother's going to move to Dallas. I think you two might get along really nicely. And I'm thinking, oh, great. She's trying to set me up with her brother. Well, she was, and she did. And it was pretty much love at first sight. And we were married a year later. So it's a good story. Good story.
We all need good friends like that.
Yes, we do. I thank her a lot for that.
If you had the opportunity to talk to your great-great-great-great-grandchildren, 2 things. 1, how would you describe yourself to them? And 2, what would you want to tell them?
I'll do what I would want to tell them first. I think I would want to tell them to be brave. Like I said, I moved down here when I was 22 years old, down to Texas. I'd never been here. I didn't know anybody. And looking back at it, it was crazy. As a mom now, I'm like, how in the world did my mother let me do that? But it was the best thing that happened to me because I met my husband and I made lifelong friends and had good jobs. So be brave. Don't be afraid to do something just because you've never done it or because it sounds scary, because it might be scary. But, in my instance, I knew that was what God wanted me to do. I know he wanted me down here. He was with me the whole way. So it was the right thing for me to do. And so then I think maybe also then I would say to them, I want them to know that I followed my heart. I had a goal. I wanted to do something and I did it. I want them to know that. And I want them to know that they can be brave too. Follow your heart.
And then how would you describe yourself to them?
I'm a passionate person. When I believe in something, I believe in it with all my heart. And I will probably die on the sword of whatever it is we're talking about. So I'm a passionate person. I'm a faithful person. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something. Responsible. I was the second born, but I really have the traits of the firstborn. My sister and I kind of flipped there. So I think that's how I would describe myself. Dependable, reliable, passionate, trustworthy, all of those things.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, besides quilting, are there other crafts that you do or have done in the past?
I am a seamstress or a sewist, I guess they call them now. Started out sewing when I was young. My mom sewed. And that's really where it all started, is that when I had kids and I didn't want to work outside the home, I started a sewing business because I'd been sewing for myself for years and I always enjoyed it. So I started sewing for other people and had a business out of my house for a long time, really for probably about 7 or 8 years. Sewed everything from curtains to pillows to wedding dresses and bridesmaids dresses. And I just did it all. So that's really the number one thing that I do besides quilting. And I still like to do it. I like to do it for my granddaughter. I only have one granddaughter. I have 3 grandsons, 1 granddaughter. So I do like to sew for her too.
How about other hobbies?
I love to read. I don't know if that's a hobby, but I love to read. I guess that's something else I do in my spare time. I love to do puzzles. I would always have a puzzle on the table where I'm sitting now if I had my choice. I'm in a bowling league, so I bowl once a week. Well, I'm actually still recuperating from my surgery, but I'm going to go back to bowling pretty soon. So really sewing, puzzles and bowling, reading, those are my hobbies. Pretty generic hobbies.
Do you think any of those hobbies show up in your quilting?
Oh, I should do a bowling quilt. And I don't know that any of them have showed up yet. I do have a couple of novelty fabrics that do have books in them, really old-fashioned prints that have the old-fashioned books, but I haven't even used that fabric yet. So I got to save it for something special stash. Nothing has showed up yet, I don't think. Not that I could think of. Puzzles either. I do have a puzzle fabric that I've used before, but that's about it.
Yeah. Well, putting a quilt together is similar to putting a puzzle together.
Very true, especially if you do the foundation paper piecing. It really is almost a puzzle. And I love that. I love doing FPP.
Who introduced you to quilting, or did you just start on your own?
I've known about quilting really my whole life. My grandmother was a quilter. My mom did quilts. Both my grandmother and my mom did a quilt for each of their grandkids, and I'm hoping to carry on that tradition. So I've always known about quilting, but I never really did quilting until COVID, when a friend of mine, we were talking one time and she said, "Oh, I'm doing this fun quilt. You should do it. It's a block of the month." And, I'm like, well, I don't have anything else to do. So, okay, fell in love with it. Her sister is an avid quilter and a beautiful quilter. And so then she got my friend hooked into it, and then I'm hooked into it. So the 3 of us have done block of the months together. We, text each other back and forth all the time, questions, color choices, quilting patterns, all that kind of stuff. So definitely my really good friend in Dallas got me started, really started into it. As we call it, the cult. She introduced me to the quilting cult. I'm now a member of the cult.
Well, if you're going to be a member of a cult, the quilting one is a good one to be in.
That's true.
Whether it's a quilt that you made or a quilt someone else made, do you have a favorite quilt?
I think so far the favorite quilt that I have is The Feathers by Alison Glass. It was the second block of the month I did with my two friends, and it's just beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I loved it. It's a foundation paper piecing. It's the first foundation paper piecing I had done. Loved it. Loved the colors that my friends helped me pick because I didn't have nearly enough knowledge to do this. So they helped me with all of that. Love the way it looks. Yeah, I love it. My favorite.
Now, you started not all that long ago, but I guess you can compare it to the tools that you use for your sewing all those years. Is there a tool that you are so happy you have?
I am, and it's the block lock, which helps when you're doing half square triangles. It's kind of hard to explain. I had to watch a YouTube on it because I was doing another block of the month and it was a lot of half square triangles. And they recommended getting this to help you cut your block square. And it does. You slide this block lock into the half square and then you can just square it up beautifully. It's fabulous. It's called block lock and I love it. Highly recommend it.
Is there a step in the quilting process that you love or look forward to?
The piecing it together and seeing it all come together, probably because I hadn't really thought about this, but like what you said, it's like a puzzle. You just start to put it together and it just builds on itself. And pretty soon you start to see what it is. And, you know, you start off with one block and then you make another block and then those two blocks go together. So the piecing, I think of all the pieces, is my favorite part. Like that the best.
Share your worst quilting experience.
I really haven't been quilting that long, but I think probably right now my worst quilting experience is actually what I'm working on. And I'm doing t-shirt quilts for my sister. When I was up to see her, she said, "Oh, I have these old t-shirts that I'd love you to make me some quilt." She said, "A quilt." Well, then she brings down this tub that was massive, full of all of these t-shirts from college and her nieces and nephews, you know, sports activities. So we started laying it all out, and we actually have, there will now be 3 quilts. So I'm doing 3 t-shirt quilts for her. And just trying to figure out the sashing between all of these different size blocks, because she went ahead and cut out all of the logos. So some of them are this big and, you know, some of them are 12 inches and some of them are 2 inches. And it's just, so I'm having a time with that. I would say it's been my worst experience so far for my, 3 years of quilting.
Wow, just think of all the experience you're getting.
I don't know that I want to experience in making t-shirt quilts. Oh.
Well, obviously, we all have 24 hours, and we could use that time doing many different things. What do you think has drawn you to make quilts with that time?
I love the process. I love turning little scraps of fabric into something. I don't know if you've heard the Alison Glass and the Giuseppe mini series quilt, where literally each piece of fabric is about 1/4 inch and they're all sewn together in these little bitty teeny 4 or 7 inch blocks. And then you sew them all together. And watching those come together, to me, is calming. My brain can rest. I'm sitting in front of my sewing machine. You take the next piece of fabric and you sew it together. So if I can take all of these pieces of fabric and turn it into something that at least I think is beautiful, that's worth it to me, as opposed to sitting down and looking at my phone or looking at Facebook. I'm producing something that someone will use in the future because I am also making my quilts for my grandchildren, hoping to pass on that legacy. So that's why I find the time to do the quilting.
Mm-hmm. And lately I've been thinking about Tabitha, how she sewed for others. And I'm thinking that's what we do as quilters. We sew for others.
Yes, we do.
Well, I think you just told me who you make them for. Is there anyone else?
My kids. I mean, already I have enough for all of my grandkids and then some. So I'm hoping that when my kids and my nieces and nephews all got married, my mom would lay out all of the quilts that she had made, only she cross-stitched all of her quilts and then quilted them. So she did both of the cross-stitch and then she did the quilting herself. She would say, okay, pick one. One of these is yours. And I would like to be able to do the same thing for my grandkids. And then if my kids want one too, they can have one too. Because I want my quilts to be used. I feel a little bit guilty when I have my grandmother's quilt, locked away in cabinet because it's so precious to me, but I don't want to lose it. I don't want to use it and have it fall apart. So I want my quilts to be used.
Yeah.
And loved.
I've shared before that when my aunt passed away, my oldest sister found quilts hidden under her bed that she wanted to keep safe. It had been made by her grandmother, so that would have been our great-grandmother.
Wow.
And we had never seen them. She didn't have them out where they could be enjoyed. And so keeping them down there, they ended up being dry rotted and were useless then.
Ooh.
So I love that you want to have your quilts be used.
Yeah. My first quilt that I did with my friend, not knowing what I was doing, is certainly not a pretty thing. It was scrap fabric that I had. So it's the quilt that my grandkids now use when we want to have a picnic outside. We want to have snacks outside. We drag the quilt outside. We lay on top of it. If it gets dirty, I throw it in the wash. To me, that's what a quilt should be.
And that's the one that will be loved.
Yes, I hope so.
Are you working on a project right now?
The t-shirt quilts. But I'm also working on a 2023 temperature quilt. I actually haven't started it. I took down all the temperatures for 2023. I've got my color scheme worked out. I've got how many. I know what my pattern is. I just haven't started on it. As soon as I finish these t-shirt quilts, that's what I'm going to work on.
How fun. Now, I've seen several different patterns for a temperature quilt. What pattern did you go with?
Mine is really almost a chevron. I'm doing the high and low for each day. I'm not doing precipitation. I'm not doing any of that. So it's really more of just a chevron pattern. My months are going to run down. So it's almost a square. And I'm excited because I'm just really excited about that quilt. I think it's going to be really pretty. I did a lot of traveling last year. So in the middle of our San Antonio, heat wave of 90s and 100s, I went to Colorado Springs where it was, 50s. In the middle of all of these reds and oranges, I've got the yellow. It's just, I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be a really cool quilt.
Oh, neat. I didn't think about moving around or being in different places. Huh.
I like that because that's what I did is I decided I took the temperature for where I was that morning. And then on the quilt, I'm actually going to say this was in Colorado Springs so that you can tell I wasn't at home during that time. And I think it'll be pretty cool because like I said, I did a lot of traveling last year.
How fun. And then you're going to get to see where you were too. Wow.
Yep.
Describe your sewing space.
My sewing space is also the grandkids' toy room. So it's upstairs in this addition we have in the house over here. And the bad thing is that I will have everything out, my rotary cutter, my scissors, my clips, everything. And then the grandkids come over and they're like, let's go play. So I have to quick run upstairs, and put all the stuff away, lock the rotary cutter, put my scissors and my pins and my clips in my box, put the iron up, put the ironing board away, push my sewing machine back because everybody always wants to use my sewing machine. And then when they leave, I have to drag it all out again, but it's worth it to me. It's fun. It's a nice big space so I can spread everything out. It's got a bedroom in the back so I can lay my pieces out on it as opposed to up on a wall because I don't really have a wall big enough to do that. So it works out really well, works out for me. And I can keep it dirty up there, keep a mess and keep the scraps and the threads and everything all over the floor and doesn't drive my husband crazy.
I also lay my quilts out on a bed while I'm working on them. And I took a class and they're like, oh, you're going to love using a design wall. But I really struggled because I'm so used to laying it flat and not falling off a wall.
You know, it's funny because I said that the person who introduced me to quilting, her sister, has been quilting for 30 years. And one day I sent them a picture. I said, I need help with this placement. And I took a picture of it on my bed. And she said, oh, my word, I never thought of laying this out on my bed. I've always had to move my furniture around. And I thought, the novice, I mean, you know, I have helped. I have done something to the expert. I have helped the expert. I felt, like I finally contributed to the friendship of the quilt cult. But yeah, I do. I like laying it out on the bed too. I just don't have a big wall where I could put it up. And it works good for me on the bed.
Share a quilting tip.
My friends introduced me to this idea. And that is, if you're looking at something, take a picture of it and look at the picture. And I know a lot of people have recommended this. But what they did is they took it one step further and they said, if you're trying to figure out color placement, turn the picture into a black and white. And that has helped me so much, even with this t-shirt quilt, because you look at it and it's all different colors and it looks really good laying there on the bed. But as soon as you take a picture and you move it to black and white, you're like, oh, the whole half of this side is the dark colors and over here is the light colors. And so you need to move them around. And that has been very helpful for me. First of all, just taking a picture so you can see it, because you just see things differently in a picture than you do when you're looking at them in front of you. And then doing it to the black and white has helped me a lot, especially with color placement.
That's a great reminder. I love that tip. Was there anything else you would like to share with us?
I just love the quilting world. I have discovered favorite stores that I can go to now, and nobody judges you if you walk in and say, I'm clueless. I remember I went to this quilting store about 30 minutes from my house, and I said, I've never done this before. And they just embraced me, and they were like, again, it's part of the cult. So they're like, welcome to the cult. Let me help you. And, you know, even strangers in the store, when I go now and I'm like, I need a different yellow, random people are like, well, how about this one here? And they're just so willing to share their expertise with you. There's no judge. I have found no judgment for me being very new to this whole thing. Nobody says, oh, you know, like my friend says, there are no quilt police. And I'm sure, you know, you've heard that a lot. There are no quilt police. You can do whatever you want. And that's what I love, is that they are, this group of men and women are accepting and helpful. And it has just been a great, great discovery for me. I'm very glad I found it. I'm glad I'm a part of the cult.
Yep, this is a cult we're allowed to be in.
Yes.
Well, Jan, thank you so, so much for joining me on A Quilter's Life. And thanks again to my sister Ruth for connecting us. And it was great to hear your story.
Well, thanks, Paula. I really enjoyed it. And I enjoy your podcast. So it was an honor to be on it. So thank you very much. And I hope you continue to have other great people on so that I can keep learning.
Well, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You can find more stories on aquilterslife.com. or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so each episode will be downloaded automatically. Also, I want to hear about you and your wonderful quilts. Please contact me, Paula Chamberlain, through the website to set up an interview. And as always, thanks for listening.